I'm Major Sabrina Ward, 30 years old, and I built my career from the ground up, no shortcuts, no favors. For years, I bent over backward trying to support my parents, even when it meant putting my own life on hold. But when they accused me of being used by the man I loved and did it in my own childhood home, I made a decision that changed everything. Have you ever been dismissed, underestimated, or humiliated by the people you thought were supposed to stand with you? If you have, tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I dive in, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to reclaim your dignity after someone crossed a line, hit like and subscribe for more real stories about boundaries, respect, and standing your ground. What happened next? Even I didn't expect. I stood at attention in the briefing room at 0800 hours, reviewing the final draft of our operations readiness assessment, when Major General Adrian Locke walked in. He didn't announce himself. Generals rarely do when they're actually working. He just pulled up a chair, adjusted his reading glasses, and started going through the document line by line. Most senior officers skim. He read every word. When he finished, he looked up and said, "Captain Ward, walk me through your methodology on the logistics assessment." Not a test. A genuine question. That was the first time I understood he saw me as more than my rank insignia. My parents noticed the letterhead before they noticed the content. I was home on a rare 72-hour pass, unpacking my bag in my childhood bedroom, when my mother picked up the envelope I'd left on the dresser. Air Force, Pentagon Stationery. Official seal. Return address that listed a major general's office. She held it like it might detonate. "Why is a general writing to you directly?" Her voice had that specific tightness that meant she was choosing her words carefully, the way you might approach a suspicious package. I was folding my uniform blouse, creasing the sleeves with the precision that had been drilled into me since basic. "It's a commendation letter. For the quarterly assessment work. Commendation letters come through your chain of command." My father appeared in the doorway, coffee mug in hand, retired senior master sergeant posture still intact even in civilian clothes. "This came to your personal address." He copied me as a courtesy. The official one went through Colonel Hayes. I didn't look up from my folding. These conversations were easier when I kept my hands busy. My mother set the envelope down like she was placing evidence on a table. "What exactly is your role over there?" "I'm assigned to the Joint Operations Planning Cell. I draft readiness assessments." "He oversees the division." The words came out flat, factual. "That's all. That's all." My father moved into the room, and I felt the space shrink. 29 years old, a captain in the United States Air Force, and I still felt like a basic trainee when both my parents stood in formation against me. "Generals don't take interest in captains unless they want something." He said it quietly, which somehow made it worse. If he'd been angry, I could have responded to anger. But this was stated as simple fact, the way he might tell me the sky was blue. I finally looked up. "He takes interest in good work." That's what officers are supposed to do. People like him. My mother started, then stopped, recalibrated. Men in positions like that, they don't look at women like us as equals. You need to be careful. The phrase, "women like us," landed heavy. My mother had retired as a master sergeant. Solid career, respected, 22 years of service. But she'd never been an officer, never moved in those circles, and somewhere deep in her understanding of military hierarchy, there was a line she believed we weren't meant to cross. "I am being careful. I'm being professional." "We're just saying." My father set his mug down on my dresser, right on top of a coaster I kept there specifically for that purpose. "Be aware of the optics." A major general paying special attention to a junior officer. People will talk. People always talk. I resumed folding, but my hands weren't as steady. They left eventually, but the conversation hung in the air like smoke. That evening, I sat on the back porch with my laptop, half watching a recorded briefing the general had given at a conference 2 weeks prior. My mother came outside, saw the screen, and paused. She actually paused the video, her hand reaching over my shoulder to tap the spacebar. "He's too old for you." I hadn't said anything about age. I hadn't said anything about anything. "Mom, I'm not blind, Sabrina. I see how you talk about him." "How you?" She gestured vaguely at the screen, at my laptop, at me. That's not a normal dynamic. There is no dynamic. He's my superior officer. We work together. That's it. The lie felt thin even as I said it, but what was I supposed to tell her? That he'd started asking my opinion on strategy decisions that had nothing to do with my assessment work? That we'd had coffee twice in the Pentagon cafeteria and talked about everything except military operations? That when he looked at me, I felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with my uniform. Generals don't have coffee with captains, my father said from the doorway. I hadn't heard him approach. They do in joint operations environments. It's called leadership engagement. It's called grooming. The word hit like a slap. I closed my laptop, stood up, forced myself to maintain composure. That's insulting. To him and to me. Is it? My mother's voice went soft, which was somehow worse than if she'd yelled. Sweetheart, you're brilliant. You worked hard to get where you are. But men like that, they see young officers and they see opportunity. Not partnership. You don't know him. We know the system. We know how power works. My father crossed his arms. We know you're naive if you think a major general sees a captain as anything close to an equal. I wanted to argue. I wanted to present evidence, to cross-examine their assumptions, to dismantle their certainty with facts. But I was exhausted, and they'd already made up their minds. That night, I lay in my childhood bed, staring at my old high school debate team trophy on the shelf, and tried to remember when my parents had started treating my judgment like something that needed to be managed. The next morning, I found my father in the garage, going through a box of my things I'd left in storage. He had the commendation letter in his hand, not the envelope, the actual letter, which meant he'd opened it. This was in your bag. He didn't apologize for going through my belongings. That's private correspondence. It's signed personally, not just a form letter. He held it up like evidence. Look at the closing. With sincere respect and appreciation. That's not standard language. It's called being polite. It's called being inappropriate. He set the letter on his workbench, didn't hand it back to me. You need to set boundaries. I have boundaries. You're the one crossing them right now. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, maybe, that I'd pushed back. But it vanished quickly, replaced by that same immovable certainty. When this blows up, don't say we didn't warn you. He walked past me, left me standing in the garage with my commendation letter on his workbench, and I understood then that this wasn't about protecting me. This was about protecting their understanding of how the world worked, their belief that rank was destiny, that some doors stayed closed to people like us no matter how hard we worked. I picked up the letter, folded it carefully, and put it back in my bag. I had 36 hours left on my pass, and I spent most of it avoiding rooms where both my parents were present. They didn't bring it up again directly, but the comments continued. Small things. Pointed things. Just be smart about who you trust. Remember, you're representing more than yourself. Don't let anyone take advantage of your talent. Each one a tiny cut, a small erosion of the respect I thought I'd earned. When I left to return to base, my mother hugged me at the door and whispered, "We love you. We just don't want to see you hurt." I hugged her back and said nothing, because the truth was they were already hurting me, and they couldn't see it. I came home 3 months later for Thanksgiving leave. My bag was in my childhood bedroom, the same room where this had started. I'd unpacked my dress blues, hung them carefully in the closet, and left my personal items in the overnight bag by the bed. I woke at 05:30 out of habit, found my mother in the kitchen already brewing coffee, and tried to pretend everything was normal. It lasted 45 minutes. I was in the bathroom when I heard my mother's voice rise from my bedroom. Not a shout, she was too controlled for that, but sharp enough that I heard it through the closed door. When I came out, she was standing in the hallway holding a stack of envelopes. My bag was open on the bed. She'd gone through it while I was in the shower. You're dating the general? Not a question. An accusation. The coffee mug I was holding suddenly felt too heavy. I set it on the dresser, carefully, buying myself 3 seconds to think. That's my private correspondence. Answer the question, Sabrina. My father appeared at the top of the stairs, and I realized this was coordinated. They'd planned this. Waited until I was vulnerable, off guard, then executed their ambush with tactical precision. We're involved. Yes. Saying it out loud felt like stepping off a cliff. My mother's face did something complicated, grief and fury and vindication all at once. How long? 5 months. 5, she looked at my father, then back at me. 5 months and you didn't think to tell us? I didn't think it was your business. My father moved into the room. The space felt smaller with both of them in it, the air thinner. Everything you do reflects on this family. On your career. On your idea of who I'm allowed to be. The words came out harder than I intended, but I didn't take them back. He stepped closer, and I found myself standing at parade rest without consciously choosing to. Feet shoulder-width apart, hands clasped behind my back, spine straight. It was the only way to keep my hands from shaking. You're nothing to him. His voice was cold, surgical. You think a major general is serious about a captain? You think this ends in anything but you getting hurt and your career getting destroyed. You don't know, I know how the military works. I know how men like that operate. He pointed at the letters still clutched in my mother's hand. You're a novelty. You're convenient. You're there, you're smart enough to be interesting, and when he's done, you'll be the one who pays the price. My mother's voice cut through, quieter but sharper. He's using you, sweetheart. Can't you see that? I wanted to scream. I wanted to present counter-arguments, to defend him, to defend myself. But they weren't listening. They'd already written the ending to this story. I need you to leave, I said. My father's eyebrows rose. This is our house. Then I need to leave. I moved toward my bag, started repacking with shaking hands. My mother stepped forward. Don't do this. Don't throw away everything you've worked for over some what? Say it. I stopped packing, looked at her directly. Some man who saw me as more than my parents' daughter? Some officer who respected my work before he knew my background? Someone who actually believes I earned my rank. That's not fair. But her voice wavered. None of this is fair. You went through my bag. You read my private letters. You're standing here telling me I'm too stupid to know when I'm being used. Where's the fairness in that? My father's jaw tightened. We're trying to protect you. No. You're trying to protect your worldview. You're trying to make sure I stay in the box you built for me. Enlisted parents, officer daughter, but not too much of an officer. Not enough to actually believe I belong in rooms with generals. You're not thinking straight. His voice rose slightly and I knew I'd hit something true. You're embarrassing yourself. When this falls apart, and it will, don't come crying to us. The silence that followed was absolute. Not the silence of a pause, but the silence of something breaking that couldn't be repaired. I won't, I said quietly. I finished packing. They didn't stop me. My mother set the letters on the bed carefully, like she was handling something fragile, and left the room. My father stood in the doorway for another moment, and I thought he might say something else. He didn't. I walked out of that house at 07:15, threw my bag in the rental car, and drove back to base 6 hours earlier than planned. I didn't take the letters. They could keep them, burn them, frame them for all I cared. 3 hours into the drive, I had to pull over at a rest stop because my hands were shaking too hard to hold the wheel steady. I sat in the parking lot, windows down, November air cold enough to hurt, and let myself feel the full weight of what had just happened. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother, "Please don't do this." I turned my phone off. When I got back to base, I went straight to my quarters, unpacked methodically, and tried to pretend my life wasn't fragmenting. The empty space where those letters used to be felt larger than it should have. I'd kept them in a folder, organized by date, the way I organized everything. Now there was just absence. I sat on my bed in uniform, I hadn't bothered to change, and stared at that empty space. 5 months of careful professionalism. 5 months of making sure everything stayed within regulation, within protocol, within the bounds of what was allowed. And my parents had reduced it all to a transaction, a manipulation, a naive young officer being exploited by a powerful man. The worst part was the seed of doubt they'd planted. Not about him, I knew him, knew his character, knew the care he took to ensure our relationship never compromised my career. But doubt about myself. About whether I'd been blind to something obvious. About whether everyone else saw what my parents saw. I changed into civilian clothes finally, made coffee I didn't drink, and tried to work on the assessment reports that were due next week. But the words blurred together, and I kept seeing my father's face when he said, "You're nothing to him." At 2200 hours, my phone rang. I'd turned it back on an hour earlier, had been watching the messages pile up. 12 texts from my mother. 4 from my father. 2 voicemails I hadn't listened to. But this call was from a different number. A Pentagon extension I recognized. I answered on the second ring. Captain Ward. It's me. The general's voice was quiet, careful. I heard you were back on base early. Everything all right? Of course he'd heard. He made it his business to know when his officers were struggling, even when they tried to hide it. Family emergency. It's handled. That's not what I asked. I closed my eyes, pressed my palm against my forehead. I'm fine, sir. Sabrina. He only used my first name when we were alone, when the conversation was personal rather than professional. Talk to me. And somehow, that broke something loose. Not dramatically, I didn't cry, didn't fall apart, but I told him. About the letters, the confrontation, the things my parents had said. He listened without interrupting, the way he always did when something mattered. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then, did something happen at home? The question was so gentle, so deliberately understated, that I almost laughed. They think you're taking advantage of me. Another pause. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Still calm, still controlled, but carrying weight. I see. I told them they were wrong. Did you? It wasn't a challenge. It was a real question, asking if I believed what I'd told them. Yes. No hesitation this time. Then we'll deal with this together. The way we deal with everything else. They said I'm nothing to you. The words came out smaller than I intended. They're wrong about that too. Simple. Direct. The way he spoke when something was non-negotiable. We talked for another 20 minutes about nothing and everything. When we finally hung up, I felt steadier. Not fixed. You don't fix something like this in one conversation, but less adrift. I understood then what I was willing to lose and what I wasn't. My parents met in basic training at Lackland Air Force Base in 1989. My mother was 18, from a small town in Ohio where nobody in her family had ever served. My father was 20, from even smaller town in Kentucky, third-generation military, but first to go Air Force instead of Army. They bonded over shared background, working class, first-gen opportunity seekers, people who saw the military as a ladder up and out. They married at 19 and 21, had me at 22 and 24, and built their entire identity around service, structure, and staying in your lane. My mother made Master Sergeant after 16 years. Solid career, nothing spectacular, nothing scandalous. She supervised logistics operations, managed personnel, did everything by the book. My father made Senior Master Sergeant after 18 years, worked in aircraft maintenance, retired with full honors and a garage full of commendations he never displayed. They raised me on base housing, military values, and the unspoken understanding that officers existed in a different universe. Not better, they'd insist. Just different. Separate. Not for people like us. I tested into the Air Force Academy's summer seminar program at 16. My parents were proud but uncomfortable. When I received my appointment at 17, they congratulated me with the same tone you'd use to acknowledge someone else's good fortune, happy for you, but not something that would happen to us. I commissioned as a second lieutenant at 22, the first officer in my extended family. My mother cried at the ceremony. My father shook my hand with perfect formality and said, "Don't forget where you came from." I made first lieutenant at 24, captain at 28. Every promotion felt like moving further from something I couldn't name, like I was supposed to apologize for advancing. They came to my captain's promotion ceremony, stood in the back, left immediately after. My mother hugged me and said, "We're proud of you, sweetheart. Just remember, rank doesn't make you better than anyone." I'd never suggested it did. But somewhere in their understanding of military hierarchy, my success was a rejection of them, proof that I thought I'd transcended our origins. The truth was more complicated and simpler. I'd worked hard, tested well, and refused to accept artificial limitations. But they couldn't see it that way. To them, officers were a class apart, people who went to academy or ROTC, who came from families with money or connections, who moved through the world with unearned confidence. The idea that their daughter could be one of those people didn't compute. So they reframed it. I was playing a part, pretending to belong, and eventually reality would reassert itself. When I told them about my assignment to the Joint Operations Planning Cell, my mother's first question was, "Will you be working with a lot of senior officers?" The concern in her voice was clear. Don't get ideas above your station. Don't embarrass yourself trying to fit in. I met Major General Adrian Locke on my third day in the new assignment. He was 52, career Air Force, commissioned through ROTC at a state university in Texas. Not academy. Not legacy military family. He worked his way up through tactical operations, strategic planning, and joint command assignments that put him in rooms with people who made decisions that shaped policy. He didn't treat me like a novelty or a quota fill or someone's daughter who'd gotten lucky. He treated me like an officer who'd earned her rank and had something to contribute. The first real conversation we had was about logistics assessment methodology. I drafted a report on equipment readiness that challenged some assumptions the previous analyst had made. Most senior officers would have defended the status quo. He read my alternative analysis, asked clarifying questions, and said, "This is better. We're using your framework going forward. No ego. No territoriality. Just recognition of good work." Over the next 6 months, our interactions stayed professional. He'd ask for my input on planning documents. I'd provide analysis. He'd incorporate feedback. Standard operational dynamic. But gradually, the conversations expanded. He started asking my perspective on strategic questions that went beyond my direct responsibilities. I started noticing the way he ran briefings, efficient, collaborative, genuinely interested in hearing from everyone in the room regardless of rank. The first time we had coffee in the Pentagon cafeteria, it was his suggestion. "Captain Ward, you have time for a quick discussion? I want to pick your brain about the quarterly assessment." We talked about work for 10 minutes. Then he asked about my background, my path to commissioning, what made me choose operations planning. I told him the abbreviated version: military family, academy appointment, interest in strategic operations. He nodded, sipped his coffee, and said, "Your parents must be proud. They're adjusting." He smiled slightly, like he understood something I hadn't said out loud. The second coffee happened 3 weeks later. This time we talked less about work and more about everything else. Books, travel, the weird parallel universe of military culture. He mentioned his own background, state school, ROTC, parents who'd never served and didn't quite understand why he chose the Air Force. They thought I should be a lawyer, he said. Safer, more predictable. They still don't quite get it. Do they worry? I asked. Always. But they stopped trying to talk me out of it around the time I made major. He paused. Parents mean well. But sometimes they project their fears onto your choices. It felt like he was talking about more than his own family, but I didn't push. When things became personal between us, it wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was gradual, deliberate, two adults making careful choices. He asked if I wanted to have dinner off base. I said yes. We talked about boundaries, about regulations, about the optics of a senior officer and junior officer relationship. We established ground rules. Nothing at work that would compromise professionalism, complete transparency with the chain of command if things became serious, absolute respect for my career autonomy. We followed those rules completely. Our relationship developed in private, separate from our professional roles. At work, he was General Locke. I was Captain Ward. The respect was mutual, the boundaries clear. That's what made my parents' accusations so corrosive. They weren't just wrong, they dismissed everything we'd carefully built, reduced it to exploitation and naivety. They couldn't imagine that a major general might see a captain as an equal in partnership, even if not in rank. They couldn't conceive that I might have something to offer beyond my utility. Their entire framework for understanding military hierarchy was rigid, stratified, based on the belief that rank determined worth and crossing those lines was inherently suspect. I'd spent my whole life trying to prove I belonged in spaces they thought were close to me. And when I finally found someone who saw me clearly, who respected my work and my judgment and my autonomy, my parents could only see danger and delusion. That's what hurt most. Not their disapproval, but their fundamental inability to believe I deserved what I'd found. I spent the first week after Thanksgiving avoiding my phone and focusing on work. The quarterly operations assessment was due in 10 days, and I threw myself into the data analysis with the kind of intensity that made my colleague, Lieutenant Samir Ortega, ask if I was okay. Fine, I said, not looking up from the logistics readiness spreadsheet I'd been reviewing for the past hour. You've checked that same column 6 times. He leaned against my desk, coffee in hand. Want to talk about it? Not particularly. He nodded, didn't push, just left a granola bar on my desk and went back to his own work. That's what I appreciated about Samir. He knew when to let things be. But I couldn't outrun it indefinitely. My phone lit up constantly with messages I didn't read. Voicemails I didn't listen to. My mother's texts evolved from concern to frustrated to pleading. We need to talk about this. You can't just ignore us. We're your parents. We deserve a conversation. My father's messages were shorter, sharper. This isn't over. Call us. You're making a mistake. I deleted them without reading past the preview. On the 4th day, my mother tried a different approach. She texted, "We love you. We just want what's best for you. Please come home for Christmas." I stared at that message for a long time. The manipulation was almost elegant, frame it as love, as care, as concern for my well-being. Ignore the fact that they'd violated my privacy, ambushed me, and told me I was too stupid to recognize when I was being used. I didn't respond. Work became my refuge. I finished the quarterly assessment 2 days early, delivered a briefing to Colonel Hayes that went better than expected, and volunteered to help with a contingency planning project that wasn't technically my responsibility. I was in the operations center at 1400 hours on a Friday when General Locke stopped by. He nodded at the room in general, spoke with the senior analyst for a few minutes, then caught my eye and gestured slightly toward the hallway. I followed him out, maintaining appropriate distance, keeping my expression neutral. We walked to an empty conference room. He closed the door, didn't sit down, just looked at me carefully. "You've been quieter than usual this week." "Just focused on work, sir." The formality felt safer. "Sabrina." He said my name quietly, and I felt something crack in my composure. "I'm handling it. Are you?" I looked away, focused on the operations map on the wall, overlays of theaters, logistics routes, contingency zones. Easier than meeting his eyes. They keep texting, calling, acting like I'm the one who crossed a line. What are they saying? That they love me. That they want what's best. That I'm making a mistake. I forced myself to look at him again. They want me to come home for Christmas. Like nothing happened. He was quiet for a moment, and I could see him processing, calculating. What do you want to do? I want them to see me as an adult who can make her own decisions. I want them to stop treating my judgment like it's something that needs to be corrected. My voice stayed level, controlled. I want them to apologize for violating my privacy and trust. But mostly I want them to recognize that they don't get to decide who I am or what I deserve. That's reasonable. They won't do it. Probably not. He moved slightly closer, not touching but present. So, what are you going to do? Not go home for Christmas. Set boundaries. Stop pretending their behavior is acceptable just because they're my parents. Saying it out loud felt like stepping off solid ground, but also like finally telling the truth. He nodded slowly. That's going to be difficult. Most worthwhile things are. He smiled slightly at that. I'd quoted something he'd said in a briefing 3 months ago. If you need anything, I know. I did know. That was the difference between this relationship and everything my parents assumed. He didn't try to fix things for me or tell me what to do. He just made it clear he was there if I needed support. We stood there for another moment, and then he said something that shifted everything. There's an awards ceremony in 3 weeks. Recognizing outstanding contributions to joint operations planning. Your assessment work is being commended. My stomach dropped. Sir, it's already decided. Colonel Hayes submitted the nomination. I approved it because it's deserved. He paused. I'd like you to attend as my guest. The implications were immediate and obvious. A major general bringing a captain as his guest to a formal ceremony, in front of senior leadership, with families invited. It wasn't a declaration, but it wasn't subtle either. That's going to raise questions. It is. My parents, I stopped, recalibrated. If they find out, they probably will. His expression was calm, certain. You're an adult. You're a decorated officer. You don't need their permission. But you do need to decide if you're ready for this to be public knowledge. I thought about my father's voice. You're nothing to him. I thought about my mother's certainty. He's using you. I thought about the choice in front of me, keep hiding, keep managing their expectations, keep shrinking myself to fit their understanding of who I was supposed to be. Or step forward and claim the life I'd actually built. I'll be there. You're sure? Yes. He searched my face, looking for doubt or hesitation. Finding none, he nodded. Then I'll make the arrangements. After he left, I sat in that conference room for another 10 minutes, letting the decision settle. My phone buzzed. Another text from my mother. Sabrina, please. We can work this out if you just talk to us. I picked up the phone, typed out a response for the first time in a week. I'm not coming home for Christmas. I need space. I'll contact you when I'm ready. I sent it before I could second-guess myself. 3 dots appeared immediately, disappeared, appeared again. Then, this is because of him, isn't it? He's turning you against us. I turned my phone off and went back to work. The ceremony was scheduled for 1400 hours on the 3rd Saturday in December. Dress blues, full honors, senior leadership in attendance. I'd been to dozens of these. They followed a predictable pattern. Awards presented, promotions announced, brief remarks from commanding officers, reception afterward with punch that tasted like disappointment, and cookies arranged in precise geometric patterns. This one felt different because I knew what was coming. Or thought I did. The week before, my parents found out. I don't know how. Maybe someone they knew saw the ceremony schedule. Maybe word filtered through the informal networks that exist in every military community. But 3 days before the event, my phone exploded with messages. My mother called 6 times in 2 hours. When I finally answered, her voice was high and tight. You're attending a ceremony with him. I'm being recognized for my assessment work. He'll be there in his official capacity. Technically true, strategically incomplete. Sabrina, don't do this. People will talk. Your career, my career is fine. Better than fine. If you do this, if you make this public, I'm attending a professional event. That's all. My father grabbed the phone. I heard the exchange, the muffled argument, then his voice. If you go to that ceremony with him, don't bother coming home. The ultimatum was clear. Choose him or choose us. Choose your life or choose our approval. Understood, I said, and hung up. Lieutenant Ortega found me in my quarters an hour later, packing my dress blues with shaking hands. You okay? My parents just disowned me for attending a work function. I forced a laugh that sounded wrong. So yeah, great. He sat on the edge of my desk, quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, everyone knows your work is exceptional. You earn that recognition. That's not what this is about. I know. He paused. But it's still true. The night before the ceremony, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my father's ultimatum, my mother's fear, the certainty in their voices that I was making a catastrophic mistake. Part of me wanted to call them, to explain, to make them understand. But I knew it wouldn't matter. They'd already decided who I was and what this meant. At 0600, I gave up on sleep, went for a run that didn't clear my head, and came back to shower and prep my uniform with meticulous care. Every crease perfect. Every button aligned. Shoes polished until they reflected light. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it correctly. I arrived at the venue at 13:30, 30 minutes early out of habit. The room was already filling, officers in dress uniform, families in formal attire, the low hum of professional conversation. I found my assigned seat, 4th row center, and sat with parade ground posture. Colonel Hayes stopped by, congratulated me on the recognition, moved on to greet other attendees. Lieutenant Ortega gave me a subtle thumbs up from across the room. And then I saw them. My parents, standing near the back entrance, dressed formally. My mother in a conservative navy dress, my father in his retirement uniform, ribbons and decorations still perfectly aligned even though he'd been out for 5 years. They'd come. Despite everything, despite the ultimatum, they'd come. My mother caught my eye, and her expression was complex, worry and hope, and something that might have been apology. My father's face was harder to read, but he was here, which meant something. I didn't know if they'd come to support me or to supervise, to witness my success or my humiliation. But they were here. The ceremony started promptly at 1400 hours. Opening remarks from the wing commander, recognition of several outstanding units, presentation of individual awards. When my name was called, I walked to the front with measured steps, accepted the commendation from Colonel Hayes, shook hands with appropriate firmness. General Locke stood to the side, watching with professional approval but no special attention. Standard. Appropriate. I returned to my seat, and the ceremony continued. 3 more awards, 2 promotions announced, and then General Locke stepped to the podium for closing remarks. He spoke for 5 minutes about the importance of joint operations planning, the quality of the personnel in our division, the critical nature of our work. Standard stuff, well delivered but unremarkable. And then he paused, looked out at the assembled crowd, and his tone shifted slightly. Before we conclude, I'd like to take a moment for a personal matter. The room went quieter. Personal matters weren't standard ceremony protocol. He stepped away from the podium, moved to where I was sitting, and extended his hand. I stood automatically, operating on muscle memory and confusion. He took my hand, not a handshake, but holding it gently, and turned to address the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce someone very important to me. This is Captain Sabrina Ward, and she's not just an exceptional officer. She's also my fiancée. The room reacted with quiet professionalism, polite applause, a few surprised expressions quickly controlled, the kind of measured response senior officers give when something unexpected but not scandalous occurs. These were people who'd seen actual drama. This wasn't it. But in the back of the room, my parents' faces collapsed. Not with embarrassment, with the sudden, terrible understanding that every assumption they'd made was wrong. My mother's hand went to her mouth. My father went completely still, the way people do when they're recalculating everything they thought they knew. General Locke was still holding my hand, still facing the crowd, completely calm. We've kept this private out of respect for protocol and professionalism, but I wanted to share this with the people who've worked alongside Captain Ward and seen her exceptional character firsthand. He looked at me then, and there was warmth in his expression, but also question, checking that I was okay with this, that he hadn't overstepped. I squeezed his hand slightly, nodded once. He'd just rewritten the entire narrative my parents had constructed. Not with drama or confrontation, but with simple, public truth. The ceremony concluded shortly after. During the reception, people congratulated me on the commendation, on the engagement, on both. Everyone was professional, appropriate, genuinely warm. No scandal. No shock. Just recognition of 2 adults who'd built something real. My parents approached 30 minutes into the reception. My mother spoke first, her voice carefully controlled but strained. "Sabrina, can we talk privately?" I looked at General Locke, who'd been standing beside me during the reception conversations. He gave a slight nod and stepped away smoothly, joining a conversation with Colonel Hayes and 2 other senior officers, giving me space while remaining visible. Strategic positioning. I followed my parents to a quiet corner of the reception hall, near a window overlooking the parade grounds. My father's jaw was tight, his parade rest stance rigid even in this informal setting. My mother's hands kept moving, adjusting her necklace, smoothing her dress, betraying the nervousness her voice tried to hide. "You're engaged," my mother said. Not a question. A statement requiring explanation. "Yes." "How long?" "He proposed 6 weeks ago." I said yes immediately. My father's voice cut in, lower but harder. "You didn't think to tell us? You'd already made it clear what you thought of the relationship." I didn't see the point in inviting more judgment. My mother flinched slightly at that. "We didn't. We weren't judging. We were concerned. You went through my private correspondence. You called me naive. You told me I was nothing to him." I kept my voice even, factual. "That's not concern. That's contempt. That's not fair," my father said. "We were trying to protect you." "From what?" From a relationship with a man who respects my work, supports my career, and treats me as an equal? From someone who saw me clearly before he knew anything about my background. I paused, let that land. Or were you trying to protect yourselves from the idea that I might actually belong in spaces you think are off limits to people like us? My mother's eyes went glassy. We never said you didn't belong, you didn't have to say it directly. It's been the subtext of every conversation we've had about my career since I commissioned. I watched them both, saw my father's shoulders shift slightly, not quite a flinch, but close. Every promotion, every assignment, every recognition, you've treated it like I'm playing pretend, like eventually someone will realize I'm not supposed to be there and send me back where I belong. That's not what we meant, my mother said quietly. Then what did you mean when you said generals don't look at women like us as equals? When you said he was using me? When you told me I was embarrassing myself? The questions hung in the air between us, sharp and precise. My father looked away first, his gaze shifting to the parade grounds beyond the window. When he spoke, his voice was different, smaller somehow, less certain. I was wrong. The admission seemed to cost him something. About him. About the relationship. He stopped, recalibrated. About assuming the worst instead of trusting your judgment. My mother reached for my hand, hesitated, let her hand drop. We didn't understand. We saw the rank difference and we thought. You thought I couldn't possibly be someone a major general would choose as an equal partner. You thought the only explanation was manipulation or exploitation. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. You saw me the way you see yourselves, as permanent outsiders who don't belong in officer spaces. And when I proved that wasn't true, it threatened everything you believe about how the world works. We were scared, my mother said, and her voice broke slightly on the last word. Scared of what? Of losing you. Of watching you get hurt. She stopped, looked at my father, then back at me. Of you becoming someone we don't recognize anymore. The honesty in that admission was worse than the accusations had been. Because it revealed the real issue. They weren't protecting me from him. They were protecting themselves from me changing, from growing beyond the boundaries they understood. My father cleared his throat, a sound I recognized from childhood, the noise he made when he was about to say something difficult. Your mother's right. We were scared. But that's not your problem to manage. He met my eyes finally, and I saw something I'd rarely seen there, uncertainty. You've built a good life. A strong career. And apparently, he gestured vaguely toward where General Locke was standing, a solid relationship with someone who clearly respects you. He does, I said quietly. More than you know. We should have trusted that. Should have trusted you. My father's hands flexed at his sides, that familiar gesture when he was uncomfortable with emotion. We didn't. And that's on us. My mother's voice was soft, tentative. Is there a way to move forward from this? I thought about the past 3 weeks. The messages I'd ignored, the space I'd needed, the boundary I'd drawn. I thought about my father's ultimatum and my mother's assumptions. I thought about standing in my childhood bedroom being told I was nothing, that I was being used, that I was naive. I don't know, I said honestly. What you did, going through my things, ambushing me, making accusations, that broke something. And the fact that you only seem to understand that after a public declaration doesn't make it better. We're sorry, my mother said. I know. But sorry doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't rebuild trust. I paused, trying to find words for something I'd only just started to understand. I spent my whole life trying to prove I belonged. To the academy, to my units, to senior leadership. I never thought I'd have to prove it to you. And when you made it clear you didn't believe in me, didn't believe I could earn genuine respect from someone like him, that hurt more than anything else. My father's jaw worked for a moment before he spoke. We projected our own insecurities about rank and class and who gets to be what in the military. We saw your situation through that lens instead of seeing it clearly. I know. That's not an excuse. No, it's not. We stood there in uncomfortable silence, the reception continuing around us. Across the room, General Locke glanced over, checking without being obvious about it. I gave him a subtle nod, I'm okay, and he returned to his conversation. My mother followed my gaze, saw the interaction, and something shifted in her expression. He really loves you. Yes. And you love him? Yes. She nodded slowly, like she was absorbing information that contradicted previous intelligence. We've been wrong about a lot of things. You have. I wasn't going to make this easier for them. They needed to sit with what they'd done. My father straightened slightly, his posture shifting back toward formal. What do you need from us? The question was direct, military practical. I appreciated that more than elaborate apologies. Space. Time. Respect for boundaries I'm going to set. I counted off on my fingers. No more going through my personal belongings. No more assumptions about my relationships or my judgment. No more treating my career success like it's surprising or temporary. And no more ultimatums. Fair, my father said. My mother nodded. Would it be possible to start over? Not forget what happened, but try to build something better. Eventually. Maybe. I looked at both of them, these people who'd raised me but couldn't quite see me. But that's going to take time. And it's going to require you to actually change how you think about me, not just how you talk about me. We can do that, my mother said. Can you? I let the question sit for a moment. Because this isn't just about him. This is about whether you can accept that I'm not the person you thought I'd be. That I've built a life you didn't expect and earned things you didn't think were possible for someone from our background. If you can't accept that, we're going to keep having this same fight in different forms. My father met my eyes, held them. We'll work on it. Then we can try. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was an agreement to attempt forward motion, with clear expectations and no guarantees. My mother looked like she wanted to hug me but wasn't sure if it would be welcome. It wouldn't have been. Not yet. We should go, my father said. Let you get back to the general. His name is Adrian, I said quietly. When we're not in professional contexts. My mother nodded, filed that information away. They left shortly after, and I returned to the reception. The 6 months following the ceremony were a study in careful navigation. General Locke and I maintained complete professionalism in all work contexts. At the office, he was Major General Locke. I was Captain Ward, then after my promotion board results came through in February, Major Ward. We attended meetings together, worked on strategic planning documents, briefed senior leadership. Nothing about our professional relationship changed except that people now knew the personal dimension existed. The scrutiny I'd worried about never materialized. Military culture is strange that way. If you follow protocol, maintain clear boundaries, and produce good work, people generally respect your privacy. There were a few raised eyebrows initially, some careful questions from Colonel Hayes about whether I felt my career was being properly managed, but once it became clear that my promotion to O4 had been earned independently, board results finalized before the ceremony, based on years of documented performance, the interest faded. My parents and I spoke every 2 weeks on the phone. Stilted conversations at first, both sides being carefully polite, avoiding landmines. My mother asked about wedding planning. I gave minimal details, not ready to invite them into that part of my life. My father asked about my new responsibilities as a major. I answered factually, professionally. In March, they asked if they could visit. I said not yet. In April, they asked again. I said maybe in summer. In May, my mother sent a letter, actual handwritten letter, not email or text. She wrote about her own experience as an NCO, about the times she'd felt dismissed by officers who assumed she couldn't understand complex operations because of her rank. She wrote about the fear she'd carried that I would face worse treatment, that being a woman officer from an enlisted background would make me a target. She wrote, "I see now that my fear became a cage I tried to put you in. I told myself I was protecting you, but I was really protecting myself from having to reconsider everything I believed about how the military works. You deserved better than that. I'm sorry it took me this long to understand." I read that letter 3 times, then put it in my desk drawer. Not ready to respond, but not willing to discard it either. My promotion to major became official in June. Small ceremony, just my immediate command. General Locke attended in his official capacity, shook my hand with appropriate formality, and later that evening took me to dinner at a quiet restaurant off base, where we celebrated privately. "How does it feel?" he asked over wine I'd barely touched. "Like I earned it," I said. Which shouldn't be remarkable, but somehow still is. He smiled slightly. Your parents would be proud if you told them. I did. This morning. His eyebrows rose. How did that go? My mother cried. My father said, well done, Major. Then there was awkward silence and we hung up. I pushed food around my plate. Progress, I think. Definitely progress. We'd been engaged for 8 months, but hadn't set a wedding date. Not because we weren't sure, but because we were being deliberate about everything. Making sure my career was stable, my promotion secure, the professional boundaries clear. Making sure I'd rebuilt enough trust with my parents that their attendance wouldn't poison the event. Making sure we were doing this on our terms, not reactive to anyone else's timeline or expectations. In July, my parents visited. Just for the day, just for lunch on neutral ground, a restaurant halfway between their home and the base. The conversation was careful, bounded, but real. My father asked about my work without any subtext about whether I deserved it. My mother asked about Adrian without any implications that the relationship was inappropriate. At the end of lunch, my mother hugged me. I let her, though I kept it brief. Thank you for giving us another chance, she said quietly. We're not there yet, I told her. But we're trying. That's enough, my father said. For now. They left, and I sat in my car for 10 minutes processing the interaction. Not perfect. Not healed. But forward motion. Lieutenant Ortega asked me a few weeks later if things with my parents had improved. We were reviewing contingency plans, late afternoon, the office mostly empty. They're learning, I said. Learning what? That I'm not who they thought I was. That rank and class and background don't determine worth or capability. That their daughter actually earned everything she has. I paused, closed the document I was reviewing. Slow process, but they're trying. Must be hard, he said. Letting them back in after what they did. It is. But the alternative is permanent fracture, and I'm not sure that serves anyone. I looked at him directly. They messed up badly. But they're my parents. And they're genuinely trying to change, not just trying to get access back. That matters. He nodded, didn't push further. That was August. By September, my parents were asking about the wedding again, and this time I had an answer. Spring. Small ceremony, just immediate family and close colleagues. Not a spectacle. Nothing dramatic. Just two people who'd chosen each other making that choice official and public. My mother asked if she could help with planning. I said she could coordinate with the caterer, nothing else. Small step, limited trust, but a step nonetheless. My father asked if he could walk me down the aisle. I said I'd think about it. In October, I said yes. The wedding was set for April, nearly a year after the ceremony where everything had shifted. Enough time for my promotion to be solid, for professional boundaries to be established beyond question, for my parents and I to rebuild enough trust that their presence wouldn't feel like a threat. Adrian and I were having dinner in his quarters. He lived off base in a small house he'd bought years ago, sparse decoration, mostly books and military history, when I told him I'd agreed to let my father walk me down the aisle. How do you feel about that? He asked, setting down his wine glass. Complicated, I admitted. Part of me wants to hold the grudge longer. Part of me recognizes that they're genuinely trying to change. Part of me is just tired of managing the tension. All of those can be true simultaneously. I know. Doesn't make it easier. I leaned back in my chair, looked at him across the table. Do you think I'm letting them off too easy? He considered that seriously, the way he considered every real question. I think you're making the choice that lets you sleep at night. That's not too easy. That's just wise. They hurt me. Badly. They did. And you set boundaries. You made them understand the consequences. You didn't rush back or pretend it didn't happen. He reached across the table, took my hand. Now you're allowing space for them to prove they've learned. That's not weakness. That's strength. I turned his hand over, studied the calluses on his palm, years of flight training, of practical work that generals rarely did anymore, but he'd never stopped. What if they haven't really changed? What if this is just performance until they get access back? Then you'll know. And you'll adjust accordingly. He squeezed my hand gently. But I don't think it is. I think they genuinely didn't understand what they'd done until they saw the truth publicly. Sometimes people need that kind of undeniable evidence to break through their assumptions. You rewrote their entire narrative in one sentence. You'd already rewritten it. I just made it impossible for them to ignore. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, and I thought about the past year. The confrontation, the break, the slow rebuilding. The way my parents were learning to see me differently, the way I was learning to hold boundaries without holding grudges. In November, my mother asked if she could help me shop for a wedding dress. I agreed, cautiously. We went to 3 boutiques, kept the conversation light, avoided deep topics. When I found a dress I liked, simple, elegant, military appropriate, my mother teared up. "You look beautiful," she said. "You look like," she stopped, recalibrated. "You look exactly like yourself." It was the best compliment she could have given. In December, my father asked if he could meet with Adrian privately. I asked Adrian if he was comfortable with that. He said yes. They met for coffee at a place near the Pentagon. Adrian told me later that my father had apologized formally, directly, for his assumptions and accusations. "What did you say?" I asked. That I appreciated the apology. That I understood protective instinct even when misdirected. And that Sabrina's worth and capability were never in question, not for me, and they shouldn't have been for him either. How did he take that? Better than I expected. He said he knew that now. That watching you excel as a major, watching you handle everything with professionalism and strength, had made him realize how badly he'd misjudged the situation. Adrian paused. He also said he hoped I'd take care of you. I told him you didn't need taking care of, you needed partnership. He agreed. That conversation mattered more than I'd expected. Not because I needed my father's approval, but because it meant he was genuinely reckoning with his mistakes, not just managing appearances. We set the wedding for April 19th, a Saturday, 1400 hours. The venue was a small chapel on base, nothing elaborate. 60 guests, immediate family, close colleagues, a handful of friends from academy days and various assignments. Colonel Hayes attended. Lieutenant Ortega served as one of Adrian's groomsmen. Chief Master Sergeant Laura Bishop, who'd witnessed the entire trajectory from professional relationship through public declaration, attended with her family. My parents arrived the day before. We had dinner together, me, Adrian, my mother, my father, at a quiet restaurant off base. The conversation was careful but genuine. My mother asked Adrian about his research into military logistics history. My father asked about his next assignment. I watched them interact, saw my parents treating him as a real person rather than a threat or a symbol. Saw Adrian being patient with their questions, respectful of their background, clear about his intentions. At the end of dinner, my father cleared his throat in that familiar way. "Adrian, I owe you an apology. A real one, face to face." Adrian set down his coffee cup, gave my father his full attention. "I made assumptions about your character and your motivations without knowing anything about you. I treated you like a threat instead of recognizing that my daughter had chosen well." My father's voice was steady but strained. "That was wrong. You've been nothing but respectful to her and to us, and you didn't deserve the accusations I made." "I appreciate that," Adrian said simply. "For what it's worth, I understand protective instinct. If I had a daughter, I'd probably be suspicious of anyone she brought home. Especially someone my age and rank. Still doesn't excuse it." "No, but it explains it." Adrian paused. "What matters is that you're here now, that you're trying, and that Sabrina's willing to give you the opportunity to rebuild trust. That says something about her character." My mother reached across the table, took my hand. "We're proud of you. I know we should have said that earlier, should have shown it better. But we are. You built something remarkable, a career, a relationship, a life that's completely yours. We're proud." I squeezed her hand, felt the complicated tangle of hurt and healing. "Thank you." That night, alone in my quarters, I thought about the journey from that Thanksgiving confrontation to this moment. 15 months of boundary setting, of careful reconciliation, of learning to maintain self-respect while allowing space for growth. The wedding ceremony itself was simple and precise. My father walked me down the aisle without commentary, handed me off to Adrian with a firm handshake and clear eyes. The chaplain kept the service brief, traditional vows, simple promises, nothing elaborate. When Adrian and I exchanged rings, I thought about everything we'd navigated to get here. The careful professionalism, the deliberate boundaries, the public declaration that had rewritten assumptions. When the chaplain said, "You may kiss your bride," Adrian smiled slightly and kissed me with appropriate restraint for a military ceremony. The reception was held in the officers' club. Dinner, toasts, the usual ceremonial elements. Colonel Hayes gave a speech about professional excellence and personal integrity. Lieutenant Ortega made everyone laugh with a story about me correcting a general's logistics assessment in my first week on assignment. My father stood to speak, and the room quieted. He was brief, direct, military efficient. "Sabrina, you've always exceeded expectations. Not because they were low, but because you set your own standards higher than anyone else's. Adrian, you married someone who will make you better just by being herself. Take care of each other." That's all. Short, but real. My mother didn't give a formal speech, but she hugged me during the reception and whispered, "I'm sorry it took me so long to really see you." "I see you now." "I know," I said. And I did. The transformation wasn't complete, probably never would be fully, but it was genuine. Later, during a quiet moment, Adrian and I stood near the window overlooking the parade grounds. The same view I'd seen during that first difficult conversation with my parents 15 months ago. "How are you doing?" he asked quietly. "Good. Really good." I leaned against him slightly, allowed myself the intimacy that still felt new in public contexts. "It's been a long road." "Worth it." "Completely." I looked up at him. "Thank you for being patient with all of this." The family drama, the careful navigation, the reality of building a life together. He smiled. "That's not patience. That's just partnership." We stayed there for a while, watching the sun set over the base, and I thought about what came next. New assignments, new challenges, the ongoing work of maintaining professional boundaries while building a personal life. The continued slow rebuild with my parents, who were trying but would probably always carry some of their old assumptions. But also possibilities. Growth. A life I'd chosen deliberately, defended fiercely, and built carefully with someone who saw me clearly. My mother approached later in the evening, found me alone near the dessert table. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "When did you know that he was the one?" I thought about that seriously. When he asked for my methodology instead of just accepting my conclusions. When he treated my analysis like it mattered, not like I was surprising him by being competent. I paused. When I realized he saw me exactly as I am, without projection or assumption. That's when I knew. She nodded slowly. "I'm glad you found that. I'm sorry we almost made you choose between that and us. You did make me choose." "I chose him." "Then you learned enough to make space for both." I kept my voice gentle but honest. "That's the actual story." "I know." She looked away, composed herself. "I hope someday you can forgive us completely." "I'm working on it. But that's going to take more time." "Fair." We stood in silence for a moment, then she hugged me again and went to find my father. The evening wound down around 2200 hours. Adrian and I left for a brief honeymoon, just a long weekend, nothing elaborate, both of us too committed to our work for extended absence. As we drove away from the base, he reached over and took my hand. "Major Locke," he said, testing out my new name. I'd decided to take his name professionally, a choice that felt right for reasons I couldn't fully articulate. "Has a nice ring to it." "It does." I looked at the road ahead, thought about the future unfolding. "Think we can manage being married and maintaining professional boundaries? We've managed everything else." "True." I smiled. "What's one more impossible standard to exceed?" He laughed, and we drove into the night, leaving behind the ceremony and the family and the complicated history. Not forgetting any of it, but moving forward anyway together. The first year of marriage was an exercise in compartmentalization. At work, we were Major General Locke and Major Ward, senior officer and mid-level officer working in related but distinct capacities. We attended different meetings, reported to different chains of command, maintained professional distance in all official contexts. At home, We were Adrian and Sabrina, two people building a life together in his small house off base, navigating the ordinary complexities of shared space and shared lives. The balance worked because we both committed to it completely. No special treatment at work, no rank discussion at home. Clear boundaries that protected both the professional and personal dimensions. My parents visited twice that first year. Once in June, once in November. The visits were careful, bounded, but increasingly genuine. My mother learned to ask about my work without subtext. My father learned to have conversations with Adrian that weren't interrogations. Progress measured in small increments, a dinner without tension, a conversation without landmines, a hug that felt natural instead of obligatory. In August, I was selected for a prestigious assignment at the Air War College, a year-long advanced education program for mid-level officers. Adrian encouraged me to accept even though it meant being stationed in Alabama for 12 months while he remained in D.C. "Your career can't stall because of geography," he said when I hesitated. "We'll manage the distance. That's a year apart. I'm aware. We'll make it work." He was matter-of-fact about it, the way he approached all logistical challenges. "This is too important for your professional development to pass up." So I went. August through the following July, living in temporary quarters in Alabama, flying home once a month, video calls every few days. It was difficult, but manageable. The program itself was exceptional: strategic thinking, joint operations theory, leadership development. I wrote my thesis on logistics optimization in contested environments and received distinguished graduate recognition. My parents asked to attend my graduation from Air War College. I said yes. They flew to Alabama, sat in the audience during the ceremony, congratulated me afterward with genuine pride. My father shook my hand and said, "Well done, Major. This is significant." My mother hugged me and whispered, "We're proud of who you've become." No caveats. No surprise in their voices. Just recognition. That felt like the real turning point, not the wedding, not the apologies, but this moment where they acknowledged my achievement without needing to process it through their own limitations. Adrian attended the graduation too, sitting separately from my parents in accordance with protocol, but finding me afterward. He kissed me quickly, appropriately for a public military setting, and said, "Congratulations, distinguished graduate." "Think it'll help with the promotion board?" I asked. I was eligible for lieutenant colonel in 18 months. "Won't hurt. But you'd make it anyway based on your performance record." That confidence in my capability, stated as simple fact, still caught me off guard sometimes. We had dinner that night, me, Adrian, my parents, and the conversation flowed more naturally than it ever had before. My father and Adrian discussed strategic deterrence theory. My mother asked about my next assignment. I watched them interact and realized something had fundamentally shifted. They weren't performing acceptance anymore. They genuinely saw Adrian as family and me as someone who'd earned every recognition I'd received. After my parents left, Adrian and I walked around Maxwell Air Force Base, warm Alabama evening, quiet campus. "Your parents seem different," he observed. "They are. Or maybe I am. Maybe we all are." I thought about the trajectory from that Thanksgiving confrontation to this moment. They learned. Slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. That's all you can ask. Is it enough? Is it? He turned the question back to me, the way he often did when the answer mattered. I considered that seriously. Yes. Not because everything's perfect, but because the effort is real. They're not just managing me anymore. They're actually trying to understand. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, and I thought about what came next. New assignment, continued career progression, the ongoing balance of professional ambition and personal life. The relationship with my parents would probably always carry some residue of that original rupture, but it was healing. Slowly, genuinely healing. My next assignment was back in D.C., joint operations planning again, but at a higher level. More responsibility, more visibility, more opportunities to prove capability. Adrian and I settled back into shared routines, work, home, the careful separation of professional and personal contexts. In my second year after Air War College, I was promoted to lieutenant colonel. The promotion board results came through in November, effective date in January. Adrian found out before I did. Senior officers get advance notice of board results, but he didn't tell me, maintained complete professionalism until the official notification came through my chain of command. When I got the formal notice, I called him from my office. Did you know? Yes. How long? 3 days. And you didn't say anything? Wasn't my place. This is your achievement, your timeline. He paused. Congratulations, Lieutenant Colonel Wardlock. I'd kept both names professionally hyphenated. It felt right, honoring where I came from while claiming where I'd chosen to go. The promotion ceremony was small, just my immediate command. My parents attended this time without being asked. They sat in the front row, watched as Colonel Hayes pinned on my new rank insignia, applauded with genuine pride. After the ceremony, my father approached me in his careful way. Lieutenant Colonel. That's field grade officer. Significant responsibility. It is. Your mother and I, he started again. We want you to know we understand now. What you built, what you earned, who you chose. We understand. I know you do. We're sorry it took us so long. I know that too. I looked at both my parents, these people who'd struggled so hard to see past their own limitations. But you got there. That matters. My mother's eyes were wet. We love you. We're proud of you. We should have said that more clearly from the beginning. You're saying it now. That's enough. And it was. Not perfect closure, not complete healing, but enough. Enough to move forward, to build something sustainable, to allow space for continued growth. That evening, Adrian took me to dinner at the same restaurant where we'd celebrated my promotion to major 2 years earlier. Same quiet corner table, same careful distance from base and work. How does Lieutenant Colonel feel? He asked. Like I earned it, I said, echoing my response from 2 years ago. Still remarkable? Less so. Maybe I'm getting used to deserving good things. He smiled at that. Good. You should be used to it by now. We talked about the future, his next assignment likely to be a division command, my continued progression toward colonel if performance held. The conversation was practical, strategic, focused on how we'd navigate the next phase. But underneath was the steady foundation we'd built, mutual respect, clear boundaries, genuine partnership. Later that night, lying in bed in the house we'd made into a home, I thought about the journey from that first briefing room conversation to this moment. 5 years of careful construction, of defending boundaries, of proving worth, of learning to hold space for people to grow while protecting my own peace. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Congratulations again. Your father and I are so proud. Love you. I typed back, love you too. Thank you for being there. Simple exchange, but years of healing compressed into ordinary words. Adrian was already asleep beside me, breathing steady and even. I set my phone down, let my eyes adjust to the darkness, and thought about the lesson I'd learned slowly, painfully, but completely. Respect isn't given because of rank. Doubt doesn't disappear because someone apologizes. But boundaries protect peace and the simplest, calmest moments, a hand taken publicly, a parent learning to see clearly, a partner who never doubted, can rewrite entire stories. I'd built a life on my own terms, defended it fiercely, and allowed space for others to rise to meet it. Not perfect. Not without cost. But mine, completely and undeniably mine. And that was enough. Thanks for listening, guys. I'm still learning how to balance love, family, and the uniform, but I'd choose self-respect again every time. Have you ever had someone doubt your worth or judge your relationship without knowing the truth? Did you set a boundary or walk away? Let me know in the comments. I read everyone. If this story hit close to home, tap like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that they're allowed to stand up for themselves. I'll see you in the next one.